Hello and welcome to Viewpoint. I'm Oleksiy. Join me now to discuss the book titled The War is one of the team members of the journalists behind the book, Ukrainian journalist Mr. Oleksiy Bobrovnikov. Mr. Bobrovnikov, welcome to Viewpoint.
Hello, Volodya. Hi.
Mr. Bobrovnikov, just last year, the team of Ukrainian journalists decided to publish a book titled The War, which basically comprises of the personal stories which were witnessed by these journalists during their trip to the war zone in eastern Ukraine. Can you tell us why, at that particular moment, you decided that this team of journalists decided to publish the book?
Well, it was Olga Kashparib, a good friend of mine, who's the author. Here's the book, actually. It takes some time to once in a while you think over the events that happened there, and you have to reassure the people who don't have the access to those territories, to those events, that the job that we're doing here is it's about truth, and it's about fighting the war for your own independence. And what we try to do in London is to to make them feel themselves again in the London of the 40s, because that was the only war they fought for their own survival. And what we try to do is a bit of Winston Churchill style speech that would help them to feel like this is a war again, and the war is on your own borders. And that was the most terrible thing about that, because they wouldn't believe that the same happens to us.
Listen, you're talking about London because just last week you went to London for a discussion about the propaganda, about the war. So how was this book? And you brought the book with you.
Yeah, that's what we did.
Yeah, how was this received there?
They are very interested in any single piece of information that comes from Ukraine, that's for sure. The Ukraine is out of the front pages right away. We have Syria, we have Turkey, we have North Korea, we have all the things happening around the world. And since there is no big fight on the border, it was not actually for that moment. Last week it was pretty calm, now it's not again. But still it's out of the front pages. And the people who came to listen on this Ukrainian to listen to the Ukrainian stories and to listen to the stories of Ukrainian warfare, of course, were those who are interested in those events are researchers, academics, journalists, and what they have there, they have plenty of pro-Russian talk. They have plenty of this little tricky, biased things that make the analyst, in fact, not an analyst, but the contributor to the Russian propaganda. One of the cases was one of the research fellows who claimed she was an academic, the research fellow, on, as they put it, the ethno-political conflict in Ukraine. Hey, what are we talking about? This is not an ethno-political conflict when we have foreign soldiers, Russians, fighting with us on our own soil. And that's what we try to do. We try to make them understand that this is not about ethno-politics. This is about a foreign aggression.
Oleksiy, you were saying that the researchers, the journalists back in Western Europe are very interested in what's happening in Ukraine, and they're looking for information coming out of Ukraine. But very often, the information which comes out of Ukraine or about Ukraine is very conflicting. There is an information war taking place. So how do you make sure that the people in Western Europe believe Ukrainian version of the truth, of the reality, and not the Russian one?
Well, we have to be louder. There should be more of us there. There should be more of the Ukrainian talk from the people who are on the front line. And that's what those people try to do, the team of journalists who've done it. There's Andrew Tsaplienko, who is one of the leading war journalists in Ukraine. There's Motorny Sasha. There's Olga Kashper, who's not the frontline reporter, but she's a great short stories writer, and she did it just the right way to try to arrange it into some single book, because the stories are very, very different.
So because Ukraine is not louder, or because Ukraine is not talking about what's happening here so much, do you think this is the reason Ukraine is losing the information war?
Sure, sir. This is just quite obvious, because we have a lot of pro-Russian talk. We have people in King's College. I was not in Oxford or Cambridge.
The problem is that we understand that this is pro-Russian talk. The people, the outsiders, they think this is just news reporting.
That's the point. You know, the point is sort of, you're a journalist yourself, as myself. We have this little thing, tricky one, called the title. We have the character speaking when we broadcast someone's opinion. Involve someone who's involved in the story, and someone who we integrate into the story as one of the fighting parts, whatever. And we sort of call him a rebel, but we know the guy has the Russian passport. He used to be a military man in Russia. So when we call him a separatist and a rebel, as quite often many people do in the West, even subconsciously, I don't know, they do believe this, because they have this sort of UN terminology. They have, I don't know, BBC or any other outlet putting it that way. That would not be that sort of annoying for them. That would be okay, because, well, there is fighting, so there is a rebel part, but this is false. This is not true. And this is a part of that tricky thing that makes those people believe that we have this ethno-political conflict, which is not true. So what I said is, guys, if you call someone a separatist with a Russian passport, I would just ask you one single question. In what particular part of Russia does he fight for independence, for his own rights? Does he do it in Moscow? Does he do it in the Northern Caucasus, which is still Russian? Does he do it in Ufa? Does he do it in Rostov-na-Donu? No, he does it in Ukraine. Therefore, he is not a rebel. He is a militant. He is a fighter from the Russian side. So let's not try to put it in a way that would help those people to get a voice in Ukraine. We're not going to help them to get a voice in Ukraine, because they don't have a right to do so.
Russian government and Russian state media is vehemently denying the fact of presence of any Russian troops in Ukraine. And some people in the West believe that, some people don't. From what you were hearing during this discussion among scholars, among researchers, people who know more than an average viewer, an average citizen, are they still buying this thing?
They're still buying even more bizarre things, like there was a guy who asked a question about what do you make of Ukrainian government supporting the neo-Nazi and Nazi battalions in Ukraine? What do you make of the Ukrainian government being a part of it, supporting them? Then there was a Jewish guy who said, hey, one of these battalions you call Nazi just saved me from Mariupol under fire. This is all crap. And so, you know, we have this part of the audience who was the part of the people who came to this discussion who were the supporters of Ukraine because they knew the story from inside.
So, Oleksiy, this is the problem which I see here. You say that a lot of people are still buying the information which comes out of Russia, from Russian government, from Russian media. There are no Russian military in Ukraine. At the same time, you say that Ukrainian journalists say that these guys are Russians. So, for the outsider, for the third party, how do they make sure who do they believe? The Russian government or some Ukrainian journalists?
Well, you know, this is the most tricky part of all that story, this propaganda war and the hybrid war, because you have Russia today, you have other outlets that work for the Russian propaganda. You even have the good old-style, old-fashioned U.S. or British newspapers who still can do some columns and some discussions that would suggest this Russian point of view. And you could not control it in a normal civilized society, because there are plenty of opinions, and those opinion makers make the public believe that they're sincere in what they're talking about. And you know pretty well when you read some pro-Russian site, sort of like Russia Today or something else, you have dozens, hundreds of normal news pieces being written in a way that would not make it different from any other source, like Reuters or BBC, something else. And then, once in a while, you get this little title calling rebels, saying sort of rebels are demanding this or that, and the Ukrainian military had shut down a boy on the front, or something like that. And
okay,
these
so
pieces,
the question is, how do you make sure that the third party, the people in the West, believe Ukraine and not Russia?
You have to get louder. There should be more of you. You should present the facts as well as your own emotional attitude to that, because making them understand that this is a war for the independence of your own country would possibly make them understand that they could have been in your own place. They could have stand in your own boots.
Yeah, looks like still a lot of things to do for Ukrainian government. Mr. Bobrovnikov, many thanks for finding the time to come and talk to us. Really appreciate that. We were talking to one of the team members of the journalists behind the book, The War, and about information war. I'm Volodymyr Solhub. Thank you for watching Viewpoint.